Okay, class, we're back, and I want to pick up on the valves from the code book. I don't think I'm going to have time to go over the valves in the textbook, but a lot of this will overlap. All right, the next thing that comes up here on page this is on page 154. If those of you who have a book, uh, this is called Silcox, hose bibs, and wall hydrants. Now, a silcock and hose bib. Silcock is usually the name given to the outside faucet of any house, and sometimes we'll call it a hose bib, but that's also used inside like a commercial building where they have a floor drain. You're supposed to have a hose bib to wash it down, and a wall hydrant is also another name for one of those valves. We have lawn hydrants. That's like it looks like almost like a well pump handle out in the field, and it's a long shaft that goes into the ground, and it takes a lot more to talk about than we have time for right here. So there are different types of shutoffs that we put in the walls. Uh, the one that we do the most by far is the outside faucet, also called the silcock. Usually we put two in any new house unless the owner specifies they want more. Now, one thing that most of you who have done houses know is that you probably install frost-free silcocks. That's the one with the shutoff and that long, like a piece of copper pipe with a shaft inside, and the washer is at the end so that it won't freeze. It's also called a frost-free silcock. I mean, it goes by a couple of names, but frost-free, I guess, is the best one. And it comes in 6, 8, 10, and 12, as I remember. And you attach it outside after you drill a hole, and it extends into the basement. It extends in as the length of it minus the thickness of the wall. So it might be an inch, inch and a half of wall, and then you're inside for the rest of the distance where it's warmer. Ideally, it's warmer inside. Now, even with that, you still need to have a shutoff. And it mentions here that all silcocks, among hose bibs and wall hydrants, shall have a shutoff valve inside the building. Okay, so you put in your frost-free outside, hook it all up. You go back inside the building, and then you put a shutoff in the basement or in the ceiling of whatever room it comes out in, usually the basement, of course. Okay, now that's a good time to talk about a stop and waste. All right. So we're going to do a wall. And this is the top of the foundation. And then on there, you got your sill. And then you have the sill plate right here. And then you have your wall coming up there like that. Not as thick as the foundation. And right about here, you have a faucet coming through. And I'm going to make it a little heavier. And the shutoff is always like this. It's how you can tell it's a frost-free, because it has to be, it can't be at the top. It's got to be straight on. So the shaft runs the length of it, and the washer is back there. Okay, and then from there, I'll turn it red. You come in a little further, and now you're going to put a shutoff here. And we'll turn it upside down. And right here in the middle of it, on this valve, there's a little, call it a button. And what it does is when you close this valve off, it shuts the water off going out to the silcock. I would leave it open, so any water that accumulates in there will run out. And this button here lets the water downstream, which is this way, drain out, and it actually drips down. Okay, so you shut it off here, once you install it, and open this little button here, the waste, what they call the waste, and it drains the water out. And this here, you can open up the handle because now there's no water in there. Also, when you get a frost-free faucet, be sure you use that wedge they send with it. It's like a plastic wedge, like a shingle wedge. And what it does, if you think about a shingle on a house, a shingle kicks out a little bit, right? It comes out slightly like this, and they overlap each other, right? And so on. and that angle is enough, not many, we'll say 5 degrees, but what happens is the water will stay in there. And it happened to me. I was still an apprentice at the time. That's my excuse. And I guess I did not kick it up high enough. I don't think I used the wedge, or I didn't see the wedge, or who knows what. And this froze. The tube that is frost free, this tube actually froze. And right about here, I got a little split. If you haven't seen a frozen pipe, you know how it just kind of, almost like you stepped on a banana, it just opens up right about there. I squeezed it closed with a pair of pliers, sanded it, and put some solder on it. It was fine. And I lived there for another 20, 25 years, never had a problem with it. But you really don't want that. Okay, so this is a frost-free Silcock, and this is the stop and waste. Remember that. And if you're taking notes, you can mention that that's a globe valve or a ball valve. It can be either one. Because it's not the water service, it's your choice, whatever valve you want. Ball valves are the best by far. There's nothing better than a ball valve, especially a ball valve with a waste. A little expensive, but it's got the handle instead of the wheel, of course. It would look like this, right? So you turn it, quarter turn, shut it off, open the waste, done. See you in the fall. I'll see you next season. Okay, then you would close this, because this you leave open. Close this, tighten this, and go outside, shut the valve off, and then go test it. Open this up, of course, and test it. All right, so twice a year, spring and the fall, that's when you service it. Okay. All right. Let's see where we are here. Okay, now on a water heater, we talked about water heaters, and just a couple of things that I want to highlight. They mentioned it here that I don't agree with this. Most of the code, just about all the code, is really good. This is one thing I think they should change. You got a water heater like this. You got the cold water coming in, and then you have the hot water coming out. And the code only requires that you put a shutoff over here on the cold. Okay, what's the problem? The problem is if you want to change this water heater, you're gonna have to drain the whole building. And if this water heater supplies, we'll say, 2 floors, 3 floors, everybody's got to be home, or you got a problem. Even if it's just a single family, you got to go upstairs. You got to open up all the faucets. It's a pain in the neck. So this shut off here is optional. And the book spells it out. They're very clear on that point. Hot water valve. A cold water branch to each hot water storage tank shall be provided with a valve above the top of the tank. Doesn't say anything about hot water. Actually, those were my notes that I added there some time ago. The hot water valve is optional. Okay, so unless there's a change in that, which I doubt, it is optional. Do yourself a favor, especially if it's a customer. You know that this heat is not going to last much beyond the warranty, maybe a year or two. So 5 or 6 years from now, 8 years from now, whatever, you're going to be going back changing it, and that valve will save you a lot of time. All right, so put an extra valve in there. And this one here, I don't think anybody pays much attention to, unless you have a summer cottage where it's allowed to freeze every winter, which isn't that often because that cold can cause problems even when you drain the system. They mentioned that the whole system should be provided with drainage. You should pitch it. Excuse me. It shall be provided with valves so you can drain the whole thing. That's unusual. I've seen a few summer houses that were designed that way. The whole system is like from the cellar. It's got pitch on it, just like a drain pipe, and everything goes straight down to it. But when you're hiding pipe up in the ceiling, it's almost impossible to do that because you're going up and down, around. very hard to get pitch on to keep the whole system from having pockets of water in it. Now, how would you get the water out of a system like that? Let's say it was a commercial building, and for some reason it wasn't going to be used for a while, and you know that the water piping cannot be drained by gravity because there's going to be pockets of water. And you take the job and you're there for a couple hours draining it, and then that's it. And then all of a sudden, when the water's turned back on, they get all kinds of leaks. It's going to be some unhappy people. So what you'd have to do in that case is to try to blow it out with air, right? It's a little tricky. Or it's probably safer is to pump the system filled with non-toxic antifreeze. I do remember doing that many years ago. That's the safest way. You pump it up from the basement. I remember doing a commercial building. It was an old school. And you open all the faucets. And when it gets to the first floor and the antifreeze comes out, you shut all the faucets. Then you go to the second floor. When it starts coming out there, shut all the faucets. Okay, that way you know that there's no water caught in the piping. All right. Okay, I'm going to end on the. This is just too big a chapter. Even in the book, this chapter has got, even though it's a few pages, there's just so much to cover here. I'm going to end on this here, the saddle valve. I want to use them. Okay, saddle valve. And they say it straight out. Saddle valves are prohibited in the water supply line. Okay, so what's a saddle valve? Let's say you have a piece of pipe like this. A saddle valve would be a valve that goes over the pipe. It clamps on the pipe, right? So we'll say it's got two halves that go over it. So if you looked at it this way, you would have one half that, I think it's right in the middle here. Like that, and then the bottom half goes like that. And then there's a bolt right here and another one over here. So you clamp it on the pipe. And on the top, underneath, right up here, I don't know if I can sneak this in, there's a piece of rubber like that on the outside. And the pipe would be right here. Like that. It's supposed to be round. Sorry about the sketch. All right, so what happens now? There's a valve that sticks up right here. And it's got a very thin little handle. And what you do, it's pretty hard to turn. And probably wear a glove when you do this. Turn this here down, right? And what it does is it threads right into the pipe itself like that. It makes a pinhole, a little bigger than a pinhole, like a BB hole maybe. And then you take this and you back it off, right? Back it off, and then the water will come out. Okay, and I'm trying to remember now where the tubing is, but there is a tube that comes off here, and I'm a little rusty on it. I never use these things. I might have used one once, I don't know, but they're illegal. All right, now the ice maker kit is an example of one of these, right? An ice maker kit has a saddle valve, a little brass valve, and it has some clear plastic tubing that's polyethylene, which is not legal. So it's a double header. You got an illegal valve and you got illegal tubing. Polyethylene, I've had this described to me as like a shingle. You can snap it. It's strong one way, but not the other. PEX tubing is like polyethylene, like plywood. It goes different ways. The grain goes one way, then the other, so it's equally strong all around. Polyethylene is not. I have never heard of it breaking down and causing a problem, but it's not legal. But neither is the valve. So if you're going to use the valve, you might as well use the tubing. What should you have used here? You should have used a regular valve, right? A ball valve. Any kind of valve that the code recognizes, a stop and waste, a 3/4 copper by 3 by quarter compression, something like that. right? But you have to cut a T in to do that. I'm thinking about copper. Now you guys do a lot of PEX, but an older job where you've got copper, you're gonna have to drain the water and cut into it. This here is very clean. You don't have to drain anything. You can do it under pressure, right? So that's the advantage. The problem is that this valve is not allowed by code. So what it means is don't even think of using that if you're going to have it inspected. Okay, with that, I think we're out of time. I will see you back in the class when we go live. See you then.